Hey, what's going on, Facebook? This is George. I hope you're all well. I want to thank you once again for tuning in and spending an hour with me, or approximately an hour. Um, I'm just going to wait and see if anybody cares to join this live video. A couple things. Number one, I hope you're all well. I hope you're all staying sane. I hope you all can get to do the things that keep you sane. I, on my end, there's a good amount of practicing going on. There's a good amount of learning new software, learning Pro Tools. Hey, what's going on, Dennis? Good to see you. Um, there's a good amount of reevaluating my own playing. Um, there's a good amount of home improvement. So yeah, there's a lot going on over here. Trying to make the best of this time, and part of that is that as many other people have also done, have signed up. I have signed up to do webinars, and one of them was yesterday, hosted by Berkeley, by the Berkeley College bass department, and it was fantastic. My hat goes off to them. Um, it was it was so. Hey, what's going on, Dennis? It was so fantastic to see who was in there. It was Steve Bailey and Victor Wooten who were the hosts, I believe, and they had Marcus Miller and Pooji Bell as the main guests. And apparently, every week they have secret guests, or yeah, they have guests come on that were not announced beforehand. And this week, or yesterday I should say, it was Ron Carter, Will Lee, Chuck Rainey, John Patitucci, Divinity Rocks, Bob Franceschini. If I'm leaving somebody out, oh, and Anthony Jackson. Hello. So unbelievable. It was such a treat to be glued in front of the computer for 2 hours and listen to them talk about their careers, about what they're doing right now, how they're dealing with the pandemic, how they are dealing with the changing of times, with what they coined the phrase the new normal. You know what the new normal is going to be after this pandemic is over. Or what it already is, So fascinating, really fascinating. Hey, what's going on, Jamie? Good to see you. So today's live video is once again entitled Show Preparation, although this time it is episode 3, and this being, I'm going chronologically backwards. I started with Into Proud. The one show that I did before Into Proud was Fun Home, and the one before that was a show called Lady Day at Emerson's Bar and Grill, starring Audra McDonald. And it was, hey, what's going on, Tony? Chris Marshak. It was at Circle in the Square Theater, I believe in 2015. I think it ran for about 8 months, if not longer. Good to see you too, Jamie. And I came to the project by way of being recommended for it by the music supervisor, who was Tim Weil, and the MD, the music director, who was Shelton Beckton. I had previously worked with Shelton at the show Memphis, and I had known Tim from being a sub at a show called Shrek, based on the movie Shrek, and he was I believe he was the MD, and he probably had some other functions as well. Anyway, both of those gentlemen recommended me for the job, and needless to say, I was flattered that they did that. What's going on, Matt? Ryan, good to see you guys. Chris Rogers, welcome back. So, Lady Day was set in 1959. It was about Billie Holiday, a famous jazz singer, and it was set in Philadelphia in 1959 at this place, Emerson's Bar and Grill, that, if I remember this correctly, may have existed or it may not have existed, or a place like that existed. You have to forgive me, I forgot the name of the playwright. I think his name was Laney Robertson. No, anyway, I forgot his name. So you can look all of that up, of course. Lonnie Price was the director, that I do remember. And it was based on an experience that the playwright perhaps had when he was a very young man, where he actually saw Billie Holiday in what was one of her perhaps last shows or last concerts. Let me just take a side note here and do this disclaimer. If you're squeamish, hey, what's going on, Kim Cooper? Good to see you. If you're squeamish, or if you're bothered by political expressions of political in a political nature, today's live video is not for you. Okay, I do not believe that you can play American music and not be political. I believe that whatever we do as musicians is a political statement, and even further than that, whatever we do as Americans is very much a political statement. This country has an incredibly bloody history, and there's no way getting around that. There's no way of not addressing that. I see comments and I see a lot of posts sometimes in this social media, in various social media outlets that shy away from saying anything political. I'm not that person. I've never been that person. There's no way that I cover up, and I don't mean about the pandemic. There's no way that I cover up my feelings or my opinions on certain matters. It's too important to me not to speak up. Having said that, let's get on with it. And here's the first thing: when dealing with Lady Day, when dealing with Billie Holiday, it is important to realize the life that she has lived. That she was an enormously influential figure. Her reach can still be felt today, and there's no way not to take a look at her life in the bigger picture, and that is, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on where you stand, taking political situations and life into account. I was not the biggest, before playing this show, I was not the biggest Billie Holiday fan. Of jazz singers, I appreciated Sarah Vaughan more. I really enjoyed Ella Fitzgerald. I really dug Frank Sinatra. I really dug Ray Charles, Nat King Cole. Those were kind of my go-to jazz singers. Billie Holiday didn't really grab me right away, and boy, was I proven wrong. to say something, say a big thing lightly. In the course of learning and preparing for this show, I listened to a lot of the Billie Holiday recordings. I listened to her famous live recording from Carnegie Hall, which I highly recommend. And I'll go through all of that later on in this video, about stuff that I listened to and stuff that I read in order to prepare myself for the show. And I very much got enamored with her style, with her phrasing, with her musicality, with her specificity as an artist. And if you guys see me sweating, I apologize. It's a little humid today. And this is, once again, perhaps not the easiest thing for me to talk about this particular show. Nevertheless, I got to appreciate Billie Holiday an awful lot, and I really enjoyed working on this show. I enjoyed getting specific because I heard the specificity that she put into her music. And once again, it only made sense to me, and it only behooved me to be as specific because, in my opinion, the way I hear it, the source material is incredibly specific. Now, when talking about Billie Holiday, you have to kind of take a deeper look at her life. You have to take a look at the fact that, and you cannot shy away from certain parts that are incredibly brutal, right? This lady was raped when she was a teenager, okay? This lady didn't really have a strong family background. She didn't, nevertheless, she managed to go past all of that and produce incredible art. This lady got hooked onto drugs. I am not someone to be judgmental about the use of drugs, but I've been a musician my entire life, and I've seen the effects of that lifestyle. It's not pretty, okay? But I do, this is our life. This is our circumstances. This is it. Unfortunately, it exists, or fortunately, it exists. So, I had this conversation some time ago where the point was made, just imagine all the incredible art that had not been made if it wasn't for the use of drugs. I don't know whether I agree with that or not, but that point is a valid point to make. So, and coming back to Billie Holiday and coming back to the political situation while she was alive, the extreme segregation that she faced, not only as that she faced on all sides, really, as a black woman, as a woman, as an entertainer, as everything, so there was just there was a lot. She had a lot going against her, and she still persevered, and she still pushed the envelope to where we as we are living now in 2020 have taken her sound or let me put this the other way around. Her sound has become part of our consciousness. We understand there to be a Billie Holiday sound because she did it. She, despite all the stuff that she had to deal with, she still came through on top. So an incredibly strong individual. Hey, what's going on, Ted? Oh, Ted Gould, my friend from the Bay Area, is on and wants some chips. That's an inside joke. I will. That's yeah. I'm sure you're hungry. And yes, we do have potato chips here in Brooklyn, and I do eat them, but they're not sprayed with adhesive. So anyway, I won't go into the details because I don't want to embarrass my friend. And there's nothing to be embarrassed about. But I'm glad you remembered that I do remember it too. Coming back to Lady Day. My introduction to the show was via Tim Weil and Shelton Beckton. Both of them had worked with me, and both of them knew me to be interested and curious, and perhaps also, interested and curious enough to take this project very seriously. There was one thing that I continuously heard when I told people that I was on the show, and that was the argument was, oh great, so you get to play a bunch of jazz tunes all night long, and you're just playing tunes. For those who don't understand this, just playing tunes is what you do at a jam session. Okay, you don't go into. Let's imagine we are in 1959 and you get the call to play with Billie Holiday, this artist who has, at this point, 1959, at the end of her career, has definitely made waves, who is definitely known throughout musician circles. You go into that situation and just play a bunch of tunes like it's nothing or just wing it. I would imagine you get through maybe one set before you're replaced, because she was a specific artist. So I did not agree with the idea of let's just play a bunch of tunes and basically get it over with. There might be, another video in the future about what it means to play a Broadway show and about the pitfalls of that, because I believe that is one of them. As you see performers, musicians, just as much as actors, after the show, rushing out to catch the train, catch the bus, and of course, I understand that. Nevertheless, it's as if the job is an inconvenience, and I don't agree with that at all. I don't prescribe to that way of thinking, and as such, I took Lady Day and the music that we played very, very seriously. There was a lot of preparation that went into it at the time. I was subbing mostly. I was making most of my money subbing at shows. There was a good amount of freelance playing as well, but and I don't remember the exact number. I might have been subbing on at least 5, 6 shows, something like that. This was after doing Fun Home off-Broadway, so there was a time between Fun Home being off-Broadway and then being on Broadway. In that time, it was a year and a half. In that year and a half, I did Lady Day. I was able to keep a lot of my subbing gigs up until Lady Day started. And then, of course, I had to let them go because there was not enough time to do all of that. So it was important to me to come up with parts to basically give this material the respect that, in my opinion, it needed, it deserved, and to give the history and the statue of Billie Holiday the respect she deserved. Okay. In order to get into that sound, I basically asked myself a question, and that was, where are we in the show? We are in Philadelphia in 1959. To give you a little context, 1959, I believe, is the year that So What and Miles Davis's recording, including So What, came out, Kind of Blue, which changed everything, from what I can tell. in terms of jazz music, in terms of jazz aesthetic. And 59 was 2 years after Ahmad Jamal brought out Live at the Pershing, which was one of my all-time, which still is one of my all-time favorite jazz recordings, live recordings, call it what, trio recordings. Is that I had a tape of that recording in my car back in Vienna for 2 years straight, and I would listen to only that tape. That was it. It was Israel Crosby, Renaud Fournier, and Ahmad Jamal were just great. I mean, Ahmad Jamal still is great. If you get a chance to hear him, by all means do so. Okay. So I kind of came to the conclusion that okay, 1959. There's a lot going on in music. There's a lot of changes. There's a change in aesthetic. Musicians are moving away from just playing standards, just playing tunes, Broadway songs that were, that became jazz standards, into more of an art song kind of direction, with the advent of, simpler chord changes, perhaps simpler forms. So there was a lot going on. The jazz scene as such was changing tremendously. Bebop had come and go. We're now in the hard bop era, where all of a sudden, you're still playing the material, or I should say, the language, the vocabulary of bebop, but with more substitutions, with more with more freedom in the chords that are lying under them. So I thought that would be an interesting angle, basically. And when the material was presented to me, we played, of course, we played What a Little Moonlight Can Do. We played Strange Fruit. I thought that it would, when that material was presented to me, it made sense to me to approach it as someone who, someone who would have played it, how they would have played it in 1959. All right, which also means taking a closer look at my upright. Already my upright, I have it right here. I'm going to play a couple things for you guys in a little while. My upright had the strings on my upright had a combination of steel strings and gut strings on them. I use EA Tomastic and DG olive strings, which are gut strings with steel on top. So there's a gut core and steel on top. What that does is that the sound, that particular combination works really well with my upright. It doesn't work with every upright, but with mine, it sounded, to my ear, it sounded fantastic. It also made, my bass has a tendency of D and G string being very, very tight. Using the gut olive strings on D and G helps me with that. It makes those two strings a little less tight, and it gives me a little more pull. Unfortunately, right now, that's not the combination that I have on my bass. My bass is not set up for that, because when having that combination at the Circle in the Square Theater, it very quickly became apparent that the gut strings did not react well to the to the climate environment of the theater. That particular theater has a tendency of being clammy and cold, and sure enough, the gut strings would just go out all the time. So I did not have the time nor the money, because they're very expensive, to change the strings while we were performing Lady Day. Nevertheless, once the show was over, I took it upon myself to change to an all steel set, because I also knew that I was going to be in the same theater for the next production. Hey, what's going on, Ruben Rodriguez? Good to see you. Hashim, good to see you guys. The other thing that we did, which I thought was a really smart thing to do, and that again comes from the show being set in 1959. The sound designer was Steve Kenyon, with whom I later on worked at Into Proud. I can't remember whether he was the sound designer for Memphis. I don't remember. Either way, Steve had the idea of going mostly acoustic, and in order to achieve that, he had attached small microphones to the drum kit, and originally he wanted to attach a small microphone, something that's about this tall, the lavalier mic, I guess, to the bass. And who knows me knows that I'm very specific with my sound, and I didn't like that idea at all. And basically put my foot down and said, nah, that's not gonna work. I'm also not a big fan of the microphone stuffed in foam under the bridge. No, this is my only upright bass, and all these endeavors kind of, in my opinion, do more harm than they actually help. So I do have two very good pickups on my bass. I got the Realist pickup by David Gage, and I have two versions of that pickup. And I ended up using those pickups. I don't remember whether it was the old version or the more modern version. I just don't remember. Nevertheless, the signal was from my upright into the pickup going into my Avalon U5 DI, and from the DI to the house. No monitor speakers, no headphones, none of that. And yeah, Ruben just pointed this out in the chat, and I play with a really high action. Well, I shouldn't say really high, but I play with a fairly high action. None of my subs at the time wanted to play my bass. One of them, in fact, Ugano Okegwo, who's a fantastic bass player here in the city, he played the show and he called me the next day and said, listen, dude, I gotta tell you, I love doing it and I think everything went well, and everything did go well, but I can't play your bass. There's no way. And for those who don't know, Ogana is primarily known as an straight ahead jazz player, straight ahead upright player. So yeah, that kind of brought on some difficulties, didn't it? Nevertheless, we took care of all of that. We had all of my subs bring their own basses, do a little line check, and that took care of everything. As I said, the sound design was based on a mostly acoustic sound. Okay, so no amplifiers, no monitor speakers. Some parts of the show were completely acoustic. All right, so hey, what's going on, EK? So the sound of the bass together with the piano, together with the drum set, really had to project well. David White has a question: how much input did you have on my book? Was it a read this down kind of thing, or did you get a lot of say? Most of my shows start off as a read this down kind of thing, and then I say something, and then I play what I need to play. That's what it is. There's been one exception to that situation. So yes, I had a lot of input to my show, to my book. Tim Weil expressively asked me, who was the music supervisor, he made it very clear that he wanted our input. And I thought that was a brilliant move on his part. He understood, hey, what's going on, Quentin? Good to see you. He understood that this music was very much a live playing situation. And by that, I mean, again, not live playing in terms of a jam session where you go up and you blow, or you just, hold on for dear life or anything like that. No, a live playing jazz situation where you play parts, okay, where songs are rehearsed, where there's a certain sound that the leader, in this case, it was Billie Holiday, intended to hear, all right? Maybe this is a good time, because we talked about the technicalities right now, the strings, the string height, the almost acoustic nature of playing behind this singer. Maybe this is a good time to give you guys an idea of what albums I listen to in order to prepare for this show. First and foremost, Ahmad Jamal Live at Pershing, one of my all-time favorite albums, okay? Together with Live at, is it called Live at the Five Spot? There are several versions of that album out, and I highly recommend getting them. Some of them were done in 57, some of them in 58. That trio made, I know that I found at least 3 albums, either be it online or in my CD collection. And I transcribed a lot of Israel Crosby lines, but not for me. The Poinciana line, very, very important, but also songs, that don't get a lot of attention. Sorry, with the fringe on top. I mean, it's the way they play it is incredible. All right, it is so fast, and awesome. Another album that I listened to, obviously Kind of Blue. Paul Chambers, one of my favorites, always bass players, and Miles Davis, one of my all-time favorite, musicians. Period. There is nothing that Miles Davis ever did that did not make sense to me. His output kind of speaks for himself. I listened a lot to Oscar Peterson's We Get Requests, of the Oscar Peterson trio, with Ray Brown on bass and Ed Thigpen on drums. And once again, all of this kind of has one continuous thread going through. All these choices have one continuous thread going through them, and that is that these guys did not just get together and play a bunch of songs, okay? They worked out parts, they worked out accompaniments, they worked out arrangements, they worked out form questions ahead of time, and that was very, very important, and I cannot emphasize that enough. Okay, what else did I listen to? Obviously Billie Holiday recordings, pretty much all of her. I shouldn't say all because that's a lot, but I definitely listened to a lot of her recordings. I listened to especially the live at Carnegie Hall, and I highly recommend, if anybody listening to this and watching this wants to get into Billie Holiday, I highly recommend those recordings, because in the new version of them you will find additional bonus material where she talks about her book, her music book, her material, the songs that she likes to do. She talks about the arrangements. She talks about how does it make her feel. And there is, of course, in the back of my head, I hear the sarcastic voices of musicians saying, well, she didn't really know what she was talking about. And there's this old adage of, there are musicians and then there are singers, which is a terrible thing, okay? A terrible thing to say, and it's not funny. It's supposed to be a joke, but I never thought it was funny. Um, it makes absolutely no sense. It only minimizes the effort of people like a Billie Holiday. It only minimizes the effort of the people who are in front, right? Who have to sell a concert. And the only people who are benefiting of statements like that are the ones who are too afraid to be out front. The cowards who play at being a sideman because they can't do anything else. And that's not me. So I never took to those thoughts. I never took to those philosophies. I never saw it that way. Go check out Billie Holiday live at Carnegie Hall and go check out all the bonus material. It is a fascinating record of how this artist has worked and how she thought and how much thought went into her music. Okay, I listened to Little Jimmy Scott, and for those who don't know, Little Jimmy Scott was a jazz singer who sounded a lot like Billie Holiday, I guess, because he had some sort of genetic disorder that that wouldn't let his Adam's apple drop, or anyway, his voice stayed the voice that he had as a teenager all throughout his career. Fantastic singer. It's a great album, great so-called comeback album from the early 90s, entitled Little Jimmy Scott, I believe, and it had Grady Tate on drums, Ron Carter on bass, Fathead Newman on saxophone. It had, oh my God, I can't believe I forget this name right now. Oh, piano player. It's on the tip of my tongue, and I just can't think of it right now. Anyway, Kenny Barron. Oh, thank God. It had Kenny Barron on piano. It's a fantastic album. Okay, it's it is so stylistic, and the aesthetic of it is so strong. It's a really fantastic album. I think that's just about it. Together, and of course, some of my all-time favorites are Count Basie live at Newport. You know, which also I believe was recorded right around '59. Like I tried to listen to music from that era, and '59 is also the year that Giant Steps came out, or at least it was close to that. So, in order to catch and to recreate the sound of that era, I listened to a lot of albums that were made right around that time. I listened to a lot of Oscar Pettiford, all right, just from the bass player's perspective. Listened to a lot of Milt Hinton, of course Ray Brown, and of course my favorite Israel Crosby. To that effect, let me get out the bass and play something for you guys. So we kind of talked about what I listened to, but I also wanted to give you an impression as to what that turned into in terms of playing. So there was a part of the show where Billie Holiday would stagger off stage in order to shoot up. And the band has to play a couple instrumental songs, right? Because all of a sudden the lead singer is gone, and you know the audience is basically sitting in front of a stage with a trio of musicians looking at each other, lost. So we played. I forgot which songs we played, but we definitely played a blues, and I took elements of stuff that I had previously listened to and kind of made it into. We all had to take solos and try to put those into my solo. So this is what that sounded like. So there you have it. Let me put the bass down again. So, I see Dennis swinging, baby. Thank you, Leo. Dennis really wants to know what kind of bass this is. This is about a 120 to 130-year-old Czechoslovakian instrument. It's a UTEC copy that was outfitted. I found it in Vienna. It is my only upright bass, and I love it dearly, and I've made a lot of money with it. It has been a great asset to my arsenal. It sounds great with the bow. It sounds great pizzicato. When I first saw it, I played a couple notes on the. Let me show you guys. This is what sold me on this instrument. And I hope you guys can hear this. That's the sound that sold me on this instrument. I don't know if you guys can see this well, but there are two pickups here. oops, there is the old realist pickup, and then this is the new version of the same pickup. They have a different name for it, but I forgot what the name is. Another thing that I have from David Gage is I have what's called a docking station. This is this thing down here, which is a volume knob. So I can turn up and turn down, which I really enjoy a lot. So that's my bass. This is my upright bass. Again, 120, 130-year-old Czech instrument, or Czechoslovakian instrument, however you want to call that. I think another thing that got changed with this one was that the tuning machines, these are new, these are not the original ones. And that's kind of it. Obviously, you can see that this bass has been played a lot. There are pieces that were put into it. You probably can't really see this, but there are holes all along the side of this instrument where somebody had nailed it together. You know, shit happens. So there you go. That was, I love my upright. I think it's one of the, I love the way it sounds. I'm very protective of it, obviously, and yet I do beat the hell out of it because I do play with high action. It helps me get the sound that I hear, and it helps me get the sound that I like. But not everybody is like that, and there are great players out there who play with very low action. One guy comes to mind, two guys, Ron Carter, Christian McBride. Check out those two. You would not believe that their bass or their action is set up as low as it is, because it sounds so full and so strong and punchy and wonderful and just nice. But works for everybody. Different things work for different people. So coming back to the show, that was the best. What I played before, those couple choruses of blues, to my best recollection, that was part of my solo. And that, needless to say, did change somewhat every night. Not too much. The number of choruses that we were supposed to take, that stayed the same. Certain lines that I played in order to communicate with the other two musicians that, either I'm starting to go somewhere or I'm finishing my solo, I used those to communicate with them. But yeah, there was a good amount of improvisation going on. What my input with the bass book is concerned, that was pretty much all me. The bass book as such was a bunch of chords, slashes. There were forms indicated, but then also certain things. It was just, oh wow, Saudi Saint says that Ron Carter does not have low action. Okay, well, who knew? I thought that he had low action, but I don't know his bass that well. I thought that I heard that in an interview recently, but I might have very well misunderstood that. So, nevertheless, coming back to the show, there were certain things that, certain scenes or moments in the show that were pretty much impossible to write out. They were impossible to orchestrate. How do you orchestrate when a severe heroin addict really gets the Jones and needs to go off stage right now to shoot up? You can't really orchestrate that. You have to have musicians on stage that know that situation and know how to react to that, okay? Who have been in that situation. And I know, speaking for myself, I have been there, okay? I have played with recovering addicts, with people who were having, addiction problems, people who were using, and I've been in those situations where all of a sudden, at the drop of a dime, what was a really beautiful situation has now become a nightmare, and you have to deal with this. So, and again, let's not forget the political situation, the political environment that Billie Holiday lived in. So it was important for me to recreate that and at least play my part to make this authentic. And part of that was through the music. Sorry, part of that was through the songs, the music that I listened to in order to prepare myself. And I just gave you guys a whole list. There were also, and I wanted to mention this because I used the same method when working on, when preparing Into Proud. There are a number of books that really influenced me. Here they are. First and foremost, Miles Davis' autobiography. Very, very important record of time of an incredible artist. He speaks of 1959, of that period, the late 50s, early 60s. He speaks of that period at length in this book. Okay, very important. One book that I read later on, that I always had kind of in the back of my mind, was Duke Ellington's Music is My Mistress. Again, another autobiography where, in his inimitable fashion, Duke Ellington does not talk about himself, but mostly about people around him. Okay? Very, very important book. Here's one that kind of was a little more of an overall conceptual book, and that's Ricky Minor. I'm trying to, there's no traffic on the extra mile. All of this preparation work, he speaks about this in this book. The preparation work that I am doing, or that I did for the shows that I played. There is something to going the extra mile, okay? There's something to immersing yourself in the sound of an era and recreating that. Going the extra mile, for me, is the only way how I can do that, all right? Also, let's not forget, this was 2015, and we still had a president who was thinking, okay, and who was incredibly smart, and who still is incredibly smart. And I did read this one, and I started this one, so Audacity of Hope and Dreams from My Father. I started those, I started Dreams from My Father back then as well. It just seemed to make sense to tell the story of this incredible black icon, icon of black music, when during the time of the second presidency of the first black president of the United States. It felt fantastic, and what a difference we in what a terrible difference we are right now. But back then, I cannot convey enough the emotions of waking up every day and having Barack Obama be the president and playing this music live. And then, of course, having Audra McDonald win her 6th Tony, become the best ever Broadway star. There is nobody better or nobody bigger than her. And and to be a part of that felt incredible. And it made me incredibly proud to be playing this music and to be playing it almost acoustically. This is a nice thing that comes with the upright bass. With the upright bass, you have immediate feedback from the instrument. It doesn't always happen with the electric bass. It happens when you hit it right, and you got your equipment, you got your you play with good people, you're feeling yourself, you're feeling the music and all of that. With the upright bass, the response is very quick because it is such a big instrument and it's physically close to you. So the excitement that we felt, or that I felt playing this show in the bigger context of the second Obama presidency, I don't have words for that. It was one of the highlights of my life, no doubt. Continuing on with the books, this one, Ron Carter, Finding the Right Notes. Highly recommended. If you guys get a chance to buy it, read it, study it, this is a good one. All right. Made me evaluate a lot of my concepts of playing. And I'm going to do a video about the upright bass in pop music, or what I call pop music, which through its history is jazz, it's R&B, all of that. It made me think about these concepts. This Ron Carter book made me think about concepts like that. And last but not least, this is something that's very, very near, very dear to my heart. This is Baseline by Milt Hinton. For those of you who don't know, Milt Hinton was a mainstay in the New York music scene, in the studio scene of the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s until he passed away. He was Cab Calloway's bass player for a very long time, and then, moved into studio work here in New York before there was an upright bass, before there was an electric bass. Okay, he was as an African American bass player a groundbreaking figure in terms of getting called for classical music recordings, which to this day still doesn't happen enough. Okay, and we still have musical supervisors, MDs, contractors who will not call black musicians for classical dates. Crazy as it seems, but that is what's still happening. Milt Hinton broke down those barriers, and he documented his entire life by taking pictures. I want to share some of these pictures with you guys because they greatly, greatly influenced how I approached being on stage at Lady Day, at the show Lady Day. The aesthetic, the sense of urgency, the sense of history, the joy, let's not forget that, the specificity in output. All of that comes from these pictures. It comes from a lot from the music that I listen to. It comes a lot from my background. I am Art Farmer's son, who was a famous jazz trumpet player, and I grew up with this music. But these pictures brought it closer to my understanding, perhaps. They helped, all right? So I bookmarked some of these. Look at how fly these people look. Okay, here we have black musicians in the studio, black and white musicians in the studio, working, being professional. Here we have, oops, this adhesive is way stronger than I thought it was. A very young Ron Carter and a totally immersed Ray Brown. All right. Here we have an example of Milt Hinton, and this was, according to this picture, Alabama 1949, documenting the time. Motel for colored, segregation, dealing with that bullshit, okay? And looking fly while doing it. Another picture from the 40s. The granddaddy of jazz bass playing, a young Jimmy Blanton, who unfortunately died very, very young. Look at how fly these people are, okay? Talking about the joy, this is always the picture that comes to my mind when the joy of musicians. Here you have a picture of Dizzy Gillespie and Charlie Mingus backstage at the Newport Festival. These are the pictures that I grew up with. This is the understanding that I grew up with of what it means to be a jazz musician, what it means to be a professional. There's this great picture of Great Day. It's called Great Day in Harlem, and it has a bunch of jazz musicians in it. Milt Hinton, of course, is in that picture as well. And no, this side. This is him taking a picture of the musicians gathering in Harlem to take the picture. And right there on top, you see a smiling Art, which is a very nice thing to see as well. Also a great movie about that, by the way. Here you go. This is pertaining to the show at hand. Billie Holiday, Count Basie, in the studio, working it out, okay? Over here, Joe Williams talking to Ben Webster, in the studio, working it out, all right? Very, very important documents. Let's see if, oh yeah, this one is really important. I got into a lot of trouble one time because I went against the director's wishes and tried to get a female sub of mine to play a show where we were asked not to have female subs, because the thought about it was that back then, this was in the 60s, the show was set in the 60s, there were no female musicians who were professional. There were no female musicians who were in front of the cameras, in front of, in radio, TV, orchestra, whatever. Here's a picture from 1963, Mae Barnes and Lil Armstrong. But yeah, there were no female musicians. My ass. Okay? I got into a lot of trouble with that as concerned, and kind of to this day stopped dealing with certain people because I thought those practices were discriminatory, and they were just not, I wasn't going to be a part of that. And sure enough, that brought consequences with it, which I'm totally okay with. Nevertheless, so I've shared with you guys what went into playing Lady Day. It was one of one of the one of these shows that really only come along once in a lifetime. Um, there were only three people on stage, one center and three in the back. Um, and it was incredibly intimate. It was incredibly powerful at the same time. And I am forever grateful to have gotten the opportunity to play that show. Um, it made a big splash for it being in a small theater, um, and it, not having any choreography on it, it not having any fantastic staging or anything like that. It was a little show, and I've said this before, I do always root for the underdog. It was a little show that could. It was made into a movie at HBO, and I believe that you can still see it on HBO. I'm not sure. I live without cable. I've actually never seen the movie, but I enjoyed working on it. We shot it in New Orleans, 2016, I believe. Not sure. Um, so, it was a great opportunity. It was a great experience to play this music live night after night, in an almost acoustic setting. Um, I enjoyed that very much. You just saw the pictures that I showed you. That's where I got my aesthetic, my swagger from, and I played the music. That's, the stuff that I heard in order to prepare for this show. Uh, so when you get a chance, check out Billie Holiday's recording. Check out Audra McDonald's performance, how she transforms herself into Billie Holiday, which I thought which was an incredible thing to witness night after night. Um, I hope that this has been informative for you guys. I know this is not the easiest thing to talk about, but it was necessary. And again, this part of this series of live videos is to talk about the shows that I've worked on and open up my process to you guys. So I hope that you got some information out of it, and I hope to see you all next week. I don't know yet what the topic is going to be, but it's going to be interesting. And as I say always, be cool, be kind to each other, and remember that we only have each other. So be there for each other. All right. I hope to see you all soon. Take care. Later.